Hi, and welcome back to Mingus on Tech. I'm Ken Mingus, Executive Editor at Computer World. I'm here with Android blogger extraordinaire, J.R. Raphael, who's here from an undisclosed location in the Midwest to talk about Oreo. Stick around. We'll be back. Okay, so as I've said in the past, everybody knows I'm an Apple guy, but I am Android curious.
You are.
Oreo has been out now for about a month, right?
Coming up on it, something like that, yeah.
Something like late August. You've been working with it for a long time. And so I wanted to find out basically from you, the expert, what I and what anybody actually who's interested in Android would want to know about Oreo. So, top level view, some of the things that you may have found that users might not know about. I think there's some security things you've written about that are upgrades or changes in Oreo. So if I'm an Android device user waiting patiently for Oreo, first of all, let's just ask that question.
As you will be waiting very patiently.
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's okay. So how long are a lot of people going to have to wait before they get Oreo?
Probably quite a while. If you have one of Google's own Pixel or Nexus phones, you should have it now.
Which is the whole point of having one of those, right?
Right, exactly. And that's what I've always said, that if you do want that kind of Apple-like instant update or near instant update experience, you can have it on Android. You just have to pick a phone that provides that feature. And in the Android ecosystem, those are Google's own phones. You get the updates, maybe not immediately. Google tends to send them out in waves where, a subset of users gets them every week just to make sure there are no problems. But you're going to get it within the first few weeks, first month. And if you really want it immediately, you can actually go in.
You can go and manually grab it, right?
Yeah, and there are a number of ways. There are some kind of more geeky under-the-hood ways where you're going to be flashing stuff and using desktop software. But you can also just sign up for Google's beta program, which will then, since the current beta release is the full release, there isn't really a beta release right now. It'll just push the final software. So if you have one of Google's phones, you can get it. For everyone else, it's kind of a wait-and-see game, and most of the manufacturers are not very good about making timely upgrades a priority, as we've written about many times over the years. So, at this point, most of them aren't even making, other than Google, none of them are making specific promises. So some are coming out and saying, yes, this phone, and that phone will get it. Some are being a little vague, maybe sometime in 2018, sometime in late 2017.
Wow. Okay. It's hard for me to imagine.
It's hard to, yeah.
Again, coming from the Apple ecosystem, it really is hard for me to, because I'm also an instant gratification kind of guy. So it's like I'm already really angry that I can't even order an iPhone X for like 6 weeks.
Right.
iOS 11 is out now, or will be out today. So, and it really does, Apple really does push it out quickly. So the idea of waiting, for months, would be problematic for me. But, to be honest with you, do most people with Android devices really care that much? I mean, geeky types, if you're into tech, you want the latest and greatest. But, for most people who are on Android, are they generally ready to wait? They don't mind?
I think a lot of people, and I would say probably true for iOS too, don't know and don't care, and if anything, feel inconvenienced by an update, like, oh, I have to update my phone. And on Android,
like my
it's not.
mom. Yeah,
right, exactly. If you think about just kind of the typical non-geeky, non-tech interested person, or even, my brother, someone like that, he doesn't care. And if he gets it, he says, oh, what do I have to do now? And he knows he has to call me and ask.
It's going to be more of a problem than it is a good thing.
Right. What's different? What do I need to do? I mean, nowadays, most mobile software updates aren't transformative, but they're still, it's like, oh, what is this? What am I doing? I push this button. What happens?
My icon? Something's different.
Right, things are different. I think by and large, most people within Android who care about having software first are the kind of people who know that if they want it, they can get a Google phone. That being said, there are a lot of people who, read my columns, who read the type of work we're doing and are very interested in Android, but for one reason or another choose another device. And for them, it's just kind of that sort of constant struggle of, I love this, whatever it is, maybe the latest Galaxy Note or Galaxy S or whatever the case might be.
The hardware sells it and they're willing to wait.
Right, but yeah, it's absolutely a trade-off. You're picking from a set of features, and if you get a Galaxy S8, one of those features is not timely and ongoing updates. Best case scenario, maybe after 3 or 4 months, some of those people will be seeing it. Every year, we hope this will be the year that Samsung or whoever gets it together.
We'll finally get one out, get an update out quickly.
Right. But we've been following this stuff long enough to know that the past doesn't necessarily predict the future, but most of the companies are pretty consistent with their general level of commitment. And if the last version of Android was any indication, then I would be surprised if we saw a heck of a lot before the start of the new year.
What's worst case scenario? Up to a year? Is it possible that there may be,
it's possible.
or even longer? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we were seeing headlines about some phones just starting to get Nougat not long before. I mean, around the same week, I think a couple weeks before the new version came out. So it's definitely possible. And even with that, we're talking about kind of the better phones. If you have a budget level phone,
forget
good
it.
luck. Yeah, forget about
it.
it.
Ever getting one.
Right.
Well,
there's once in a while, but for the most part, good luck.
Let me ask, because I do, again, I do like Android. I do respect it as an operating system and an ecosystem. Plenty of friends, have Android devices. For someone like me who wanted an update right away, how is the hardware from Google? The devices that are going to get the instant updates or get them as quickly as possible. How does that hardware compare to some of the other phones from like the major manufacturers like Samsung or whoever?
In terms of just processing power, what they can do, they're right up there with the best.
Screen size, the usual things.
Yeah, and it's changed over the years. This past release. We're getting ready, within a couple of weeks to get the new version of the Pixels. But this past release in 2016 was the first time that Google made its own top-to-bottom phone. Instead, in the past, it had Nexus devices where it would partner with, LG or HTC, and they would basically take one of their existing phones, kind of modify it, tweak it a little. But so what we're looking at now is Google essentially manufacturing its own phone. And Google isn't personally building it, but Apple doesn't personally build its phones either. It's the same kind of deal. They have a company that builds them for them. And yeah, at this point, they're definitely top of the line. They're coming out, and rumors suggest it'll be the same next year with a small size. What I have here is the standard size Pixel, and then there's also the Pixel XL, which is
is this sort of the equivalent of like the 6 or 7 and the 6 or 7 Plus on the Apple
exactly
side?
exactly. You've got sort of the normal size, small compared to modern standards, and then the more the phablet, if you will, size. The one thing you'll see from other companies is a little more diversity in hardware, maybe a little more kind of cutting edge design. We're seeing a lot of these edge to edge phones now. These are not, they'll turn on the screen for a little perspective. So these are not that. Now, again, this is a 2016 phone. The upcoming,
ancient.
Yeah, so ancient, just so outdated. The upcoming second gen Pixels are expected to be a little more edge to edge, at least oddly in the XL size. The smaller one, according to current rumors, is going to be pretty similar to this and not have the bezel-less design. So, it kind of comes down to what you want, what features you want. There are some phones that have still like an SD card slot or that have maybe a camera you like better. I mean, the cameras on these are spectacular, but, some people just think Samsung's cameras are in a league of their own. We're at the point where a really good camera and a really good camera, whether we're talking this phone and an iPhone, this phone and a Samsung phone.
We're talking a matter of teeny degrees,
right?
Even comparing, Android device phones and cameras and the iPhone. I mean, I know that everybody likes to get caught up in that, and they all, not all, but the top end models do an equivalent job depending on what it is you want. I totally get that. Okay, anyway, so that's general, that's Android, that's the hardware. Let's talk a little bit about Oreo, which is rolling out now. We'll roll out over the next year. What if I'm about to upgrade, or I'm waiting patiently for Oreo? What should I be waiting for? What's the what am I going to get with Oreo that I didn't have before?
Well, I think first and foremost, you'll be surprised because you might look at it at first and say, okay, what's the deal? What's different? Because really, Android, just like iOS, has matured quite a bit, and we're not looking at every OS update being just a completely transformative new experience. It visually looks pretty similar. You are not going to immediately see things that you don't recognize. That being said, when you dig around a little, know what to look for, there are a couple things that are worthwhile. One I'll pull up here and show is a new picture-in-picture mode. And this has been something that you can do through third-party apps for a while, but it's now natively built in. And so Google Maps is a good example. When you start a navigation, which I'll do, and then I'll turn the phone around. So just started a Google Maps navigation, and I will hit my home key. And you can see it just shrinks down into a small window there.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Get it away from the Oreo box. So then you could go about doing whatever. I could open up, let's say, a Chrome window. And, with the browser there, I can still continue to see my navigation. And if we were actually in a moving vehicle, which perhaps a future episode we should do in a moving vehicle.
Android on the go.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like that.
I want to just pause because I would really love to have Google Maps with Apple CarPlay. Okay, it's an
Yeah.
either or kind of thing, and this is one of those things where I love Apple and everything, but I really like Google Maps, and it's not available in my car, and I deal with Apple Maps. I'm sorry, Tim, not a big Apple Maps fan, but anyway, so.
Yeah, is
Kudos
anybody
to-
a big Apple Maps fan? I mean, you're a pretty big
I'm-
Apple fan.
I'm
I don't think
locked
anybody.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no one goes as far as to say Apple Maps is great.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, and of course they'll never allow Google Maps, in CarPlay. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt the.
No, not at all.
So picture-in-picture, is that what it's called?
Picture-in-picture mode. So it works with a select number of apps, and that, of course, is the limitation. This is a pretty new OS release, and it's not going to work everywhere. You can do it with Google Maps, and then while you're looking at it, I'll show you you could take that, move it around.
So it really just floats on top.
It just
It's like
floats
that
on
top
top.
layer.
Yeah, you can enlarge it. You can go back to full screen. And if it were a video, if we were doing it with a YouTube video, it would continue to play as well. So you could be watching something while you're working on a document, or it also works with like WhatsApp and Google Duo. If you were chatting with somebody, video chatting, you could continue to see their face while going to look at a web page or whatever the case might be. Now, the limitation is that something like Netflix, which has actually committed to supporting it, doesn't yet. So if you do it with Netflix, it's just not going to work. And you don't really know what's going to work till you try it. There's no big queue. You just sort of hit the home
Give
button
it a try.
and it works or doesn't
works.
work.
If it doesn't, it doesn't.
So
Okay.
there will be more on the way. But for now, you're
I
limited
can see
to
how that would be
relatively
really
small.
useful for some multitasking, though. I mean, not just watching videos, but if you've got different, images or things that you're working with, or two different, apps at the same time, it could be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Android does actually have a native split screen feature too, like I think the iPad does, but the iPhone doesn't.
Right.
And so you can do that too. Honestly, I never use the split screen feature. It's great in theory, but just on a phone.
Nah, I
don't know.
I wouldn't use it on a phone. I do use it on the iPad.
Right. It makes a lot of sense on a tablet.
yeah.
But with that being said, just since in the several weeks that I've been using the full release of Oreo and apps have started to update to offer this is something I'm actually using. So I think a lot of people on a phone will find this more useful than the split screen, which just doesn't really fit into a typical phone workflow as much. It's nice to know you have it and it's cool in theory, and I'm sure there are people who do use it. For me, it's just always kind of been, I never think to use it, and if I do, it was on a screen this size to split in half. It's there, it's nice. Some people use it. Maybe on a bigger screen phone it would make sense more, but this is a good kind of in-between way of having lower priority content that you can glance at and see without it having to be...
Without it taking over the entire screen or
Taking over
having
the
to flip
entire
back and
screen.
forth.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, so picture-in-picture, good.
Yeah,
All right.
I think the other big sort of headline feature for me, at least, which it's not really being marketed as one, but for me is notification snoozing, because this is something I've been wanting for a long time, and I was really excited to have. I use Inbox, Google's Inbox app, for my email, and one of its core features is that you snooze email. So instead of keeping everything in your inbox and having it there and taking up space, if I say, I'm not going to deal with this now, I can't answer, but, okay, later today I'll try. Then you swipe it to the side, or on a desktop you click it, and you can have it come back as if it were new at whatever time, 3 p.m.
Can you designate the time, how long it snoozed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could say snooze for an hour, snooze for 3 hours, snooze till July 18th. You could do anything. You could snooze for 3 years in advance. On Inbox, you can actually even snooze for a location. So I could say, remind me when I get to the airport to call Ken, or whatever the case might be. So it's that same basic concept now that they're bringing to the operating system level. So if I get a notification, let's say I get a text message from you reminding me, hey,
We have a
file this
taping
at
coming
3.
up,
Yeah.
or your blog is due, or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm in the middle of something else, and I'm not going to deal with this. If I just let it sit there,
Oh, well, I see where I stand. All right, good.
Well, especially if it's
I know
from
what
you, I've got to snooze it.
Exactly.
I don't want to deal with you right
Zap.
away.
Yep,
Low priority.
gone.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
But you leave it sitting there, you're going to forget about it. Maybe you'll restart your phone at some point. Maybe you'll accidentally swipe it away. If you snooze it, it comes back, it catches your attention, and you see it as new. And so that's what you can do now. You just swipe a notification off to the side. You hit a little clock icon that comes up. It's a little more limited than what Inbox can do. You can't say snooze for 24 hours. It's got a few choices. You can do it for like an hour, 2 hours, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. You can't do by location yet, which is something that I think would be great, and hopefully, presumably, Google will add eventually. But it's still a really cool productivity thing where we all get so many notifications, and most of them you don't deal with all the time.
I was just going to say, given the overload of information and as you say, text messages, emails, anything that's coming in, the ability to kind of just slide that out of the way, it doesn't go away. You haven't dismissed it completely. It's going to come back, and you can designate how long it's going to be before it comes back, would be really useful in terms of managing just your time.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it could even be that you would set yourself a reminder to do something, and you set it for 3 p.m. 3 p.m. rolls around, you're still cranking away on a document, doing something at work, really busy. You say, there's no way I'm going to get to this. But if you leave it there, you're going to forget. So if you snooze it, have it come back in an hour, you get another reminder, and it could work for anything. It could be something as simple as if I get a notification that, for instance, my wife and I use Google Photos, and when her phone uploads new pictures, my phone notifies me when they include certain faces, like our kids' faces. So sometimes I see that. I'm in the middle of work, and I don't think to look at it. By the end of the day, I may have inadvertently dismissed it, opened Photos, which causes it to go away. If I snooze it, till 2 hours later, at the end of the day, I'm going to remember to go back and look. So it's to me, that's one of the maybe smaller, but to me much more significant features.
Yeah, I don't think features necessarily have to be big and grandiose to be really useful.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
The whole idea that something's got to be a wow factor, and the point you made earlier is that both of these operating systems are mature enough that sometimes it feels like we're sort of just working at the margins, but it's those little things at the margin that really make the device much more useful.
Oh yeah, it's the little features that actually give you something that's going to make your life easier, as opposed to whatever makes a great commercial, which may or may not be something that you use every day.
Yeah, it may not be a good commercial.
No, and as we're explaining, I can see that would be pretty hard for them to market as like not that they really advertise Oreo, but if you look at there's the Google web page about Oreo.
Yep.
It's not one of the high listed things, I don't think, but you can see it's not probably something that's going to jump out at you. You start thinking about it, you say, yeah, that would actually be pretty handy.
That's what I like about having your opinion, because you've used it, you use it constantly, and you have an ability to appreciate the little things that users will want to know about. So, okay, any other things in Oreo that we might want to call out?
There's one more that I think is something a lot of people won't ever think to use, but if you're the type of person who likes to tinker, and if you're listening or watching to this show, I'd say there's probably a decent chance you are, then it's something worth exploring at the very least. And it's notification related as well. It's called notification channels. This is one, oddly, that Google is making a bigger deal about and talking about, and I think it's going to be lost on most average users.
What is notification channels?
We'll go back to Maps as an example. Google Maps can send you a lot of different kinds of notifications, and some of them are just annoying and irrelevant. You might be at a mall, and then you look down and there's a notification at this mall, tap for information, and you may or may not want to get all of those, or you may not want them to ding you and notify you, but there may be other notifications that Maps sends that are actually useful. So I'll go ahead and pull this one up so we can talk about some specifics. Let me open the Maps app here. When you get a notification from an app, like here, we were doing our navigation, so I've just got the ongoing navigation notification. Yep. You can then press and hold it, and you will see that is a 1 out of 34 notification categories from this app. So if I tap all categories, and you can also get to this in the system settings, this is just kind of a shortcut way to get to it. You can then see all of the different channels that are available. And these are all different kinds of notifications that Maps can send.
Okay, so it's a way basically of sort of filtering out or filtering in notifications depending on the kind of notification.
Like really granular control. Whereas before in Android, you could say, I don't want to be notified by apps, or I want to be notified. I want apps to notify me in this way. Now I could go in and say, for instance, when it's telling me about travel times to somewhere that it knows I'm going, I want to get that notification, but I don't want it to give any sound or visual interruption.
Yep.
I could say that, for instance, if, what's something new? If there's a trip coming up that Maps knows about and is giving me information, maybe I want that to interrupt me no matter what. Maybe I want that to override my phone's do not disturb settings. So you can go into every different kind of notification, and it carries over to other apps too. Now, again, this is something that apps have to support. So it's not going to work everywhere, but little by little, developers are getting on board, and as they do, it could be pretty powerful. It could work in a text messaging too. I could say the text messaging app I use has this built in, where I could say when I get a text message from Ken, I want it to
go away,
never notify me, don't even show up on the screen.
Yes, right.
But if I get a message from someone else, then I want it to ding, come in, interrupt. Yeah. I could even say if my phone's on do not disturb mode, I still want it to come in if it's from this person or that person or what have you.
It's interesting because this goes back to the we were talking earlier about the customization and the ability to do so many more granular things. Visually and in terms of the operating system, et cetera, because Apple is such a closed lockdown system, which makes it really useful in a lot of ways. You've got that simplicity; everything works the same across all the devices and everything else. But you do lose that ability to customize. I would love to be able to do some of the things on the iPhone that is available on Android. But anyway, maybe someday, Tim.
Yeah, but like you said, the flip side is then just like we were talking about with the different phones. Somebody who has a Galaxy S8. which is, a newer phone than this one, has an older version of software. And not only that, but their version of Android is very different from the version of Android that Google puts out that's on this phone, because Samsung customizes than they themselves customize. They change the way it looks. Even something as simple as the settings menu is wildly different from one manufacturer to another, which makes it very difficult being somebody, whether you're writing about it or just who does tech support for work or for your friends and family, to say, hey,
right, because
go look
they
at
may
settings.
be on something wholly different than what you're used to using, and even a variation of something that's wholly different than what you're used to using, depending on who the carrier is or how it's been customized.
Yeah, exactly. So if I want to tell you how to find this cool feature that's in, this settings menu on my phone, we're going to have to figure it out. You'll probably be able to find it, but there is also a chance that Samsung just decided not to include that feature.
Just got rid of it. Well, that's true, because one of the reasons I have my mom on Apple devices is because when she calls me with some problem, which she does occasionally, I know exactly what to tell her. Click here, click there, that menu, do this.
You don't even have to think about it. You just know.
It's just well, sometimes I have to get in front of the computer to make sure I'm duplicating what she's seeing. But yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's not like or her iPad or whatever. So fragmentation. It's real. I mean, it's in the Android world, but
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a problem to the extent that sometimes it's painted to be. From a developer's perspective, it's not the end all thing that, oh gosh, how do I support this phone, that phone, that phone? There are tools that make it reasonably possible to do, but it's always kind of a blessing and a curse sort of situation, because diversity is great. You can pick the kind of phone you like. There are people who love what Samsung does with the software, or what HTC does with the software, and Motorola, and there are the people who love Google's version of it. And the same goes with hardware. But the flip side of that is it makes matters difficult. The updates aren't consistent, and
it's
what's
a little bit of a wild west out there in Android
bit.
land. And okay, good. All right, so highlights would be the picture-in-picture, notification snooze, notification channels. It sounds like useful tweaks.
Yeah, a lot of useful tweaks. There are a lot of other little things. There's a new native autofill functionality. So if you use, say, LastPass or 1Password, one of those password filling apps, or even Google has its own smart lock password thing. There's always been a way to do that on your phone. So let's say I go into the Twitter app and I haven't signed in and I touch the username. There was kind of a hacky workaround that all these apps came up with to do it, where you would kind of jump back and forth and sign in, and it would give you the info and you do it. Now it just works very simply. So once you set LastPass or Google or whatever as your app form filling thing, your service, then when you come into a form, you just tap it and it just shows up.
Android will just pull from it automatically.
Because working natively always works better than hacky workarounds. Right.
Yeah,
the workarounds work because they have to, but now it works natively. There are things like that. There are a lot of little visual changes. When you play music or a podcast, the notifications now are themed to kind of match that. Little things like that. Now, that being said, a lot of these things are not going to be the same for everybody again. So
fragmentation.
Right. On the Pixel phones, the notification and quick settings panel is now a lighter gray color. It used to be darker. But again, yet to be seen. There's a decent chance that will not be the case on every other device.
It's not going to look the same on everybody else's Android.
Right. So we'll have to see how everybody implements it. But I mean, there's also, let's see, I'm looking at my list here. There's some enterprise-specific stuff that's not the most exciting, but for people running an enterprise, it'll be relevant. There's enhanced support for separate work profiles, new ways to assign and manage app management, improved setup processes for new devices, enterprise-level controls for Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, new network activity logging options for problem detection. So it's not the sexy kind of features. But again, if you're working in an enterprise and you have Android devices deployed,
and you do, all companies do.
Yeah, then that's going to be pretty relevant, especially for the people who are kind of on the back end and running that sort of stuff.
Got it. All right. So that's a quick overview of Oreo. Quick, it's not quick. It was a pretty good Oreo, pretty good look at Oreo. Coming to an Android device at some point in the next 2 years,
if you're lucky.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
JR, thank you. Thanks for the update. For now, that's our Oreo wrap.